Last night, your soulmate finally decided it was time to choose you. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because last night something happened that your soulmate never thought would happen. Not after all this time. Not after all the confusion. Not after all the doubts they carried for so long. Yet somehow, in the quiet hours of the night, everything changed. And listen to this. The evening began like any other evening. Nothing dramatic happened. No life-changing conversation. No mysterious sign from the universe. No sudden miracle. Everything seemed ordinary. Yet inside, something felt different. A strange feeling had followed them throughout the day. A feeling they couldn't explain. A feeling they couldn't ignore. A feeling that seemed determined to be noticed. At first, they tried distracting themselves. They focused on work. Focused on responsibilities. Focused on everything except what their heart wanted them to think about. But the harder they tried to avoid it, the stronger it became. Because your heart needs this right now, because some truths become louder every time we ignore them. The heart is patient. But it is persistent. And eventually it demands attention. Your soulmate was reaching that moment. And listen to this. As the night grew quieter, they found themselves alone with their thoughts. No distractions. No interruptions. No noise. Just silence. And silence can be powerful. Because silence removes all the places we hide. Silence removes excuses. Silence removes distractions. Silence forces honesty. Your soulmate wasn't expecting that. But honesty arrived anyway. And it arrived carrying memories. One after another. Like pages from a forgotten book suddenly opening by themselves. Memories they thought had faded. Memories they thought no longer mattered. Memories they assumed time had erased. Yet there they were. Clear. Vivid. Alive. And somehow, every memory led back to the same person. You. And your heart needs this right now because meaningful people never completely leave the heart. Time passes. Life changes. Circumstances change. Yet certain people remain. Not because we force them to remain. Because they became part of our story. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more obvious everything became. Certain conversations still made them smile. Certain moments still felt important. Certain memories still carried emotion. Years could pass. Entire chapters could change. Yet those feelings remained. And suddenly they found themselves asking a question they had avoided for a very long time. Why? Why did these memories survive? Why did these emotions survive? Why did thoughts of you continue appearing no matter how much time passed? The question sat quietly in their mind. Waiting. And eventually the answer appeared. Because some connections are different. Some connections leave a deeper mark. Some connections refuse to disappear. And yours was one of them. Because your heart needs this right now, because significance isn't measured by time. It's measured by impact. A single meaningful connection can influence someone for years. A single meaningful person can shape the way someone sees life. Your soulmate was realizing just how much impact you had. And listen to this. For a while, they resisted the realization. Of course they did. People often resist truths that feel overwhelming. People resist truths that require courage. People resist truths that demand change. Your soulmate was no different. Part of them wanted to keep everything simple. Part of them wanted to continue pretending. Part of them wanted to avoid the emotions entirely. Yet another part refused to stay silent. A stronger part. A more honest part. A part that had waited long enough. And your heart needs this right now, because eventually honesty becomes stronger than avoidance. Eventually truth becomes stronger than fear. Eventually the heart becomes stronger than the excuses we create. That moment was arriving. And listen to this. As midnight approached, something unexpected happened. They stopped arguing with themselves. Stopped debating. Stopped questioning. Stopped searching for reasons to dismiss their feelings. For the first time, they simply listened. And what they heard surprised them. Their heart wasn't confused. Their heart wasn't uncertain. Their heart had known the truth for a very long time. It was their fear that created confusion. It was their doubt that created uncertainty. The truth itself had always been simple. And suddenly they understood. You weren't just another memory. You weren't just another chapter. You weren't just another person who passed through their life. You meant more than that. Far more. And your heart needs this right now, because clarity often arrives all at once. Years of confusion. Then one moment of understanding. Years of questions. Then one moment of truth. Your soulmate was experiencing that moment. And listen to this. The realization wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't overwhelming. It was peaceful. A deep, quiet certainty. The kind of certainty that settles into the soul. The kind of certainty that doesn't need proof. The kind of certainty that simply feels true. And the truth was this. No matter how many times they tried moving away from their feelings always returned. No matter how many times they tried convincing themselves it wasn't important, it remained important. No matter how many times they tried imagining a future without you, something always felt missing. That missing piece finally had a name. And that name was you. Because your heart needs this right now, because the heart recognizes what matters long before the mind accepts it. Your soulmate's mind was finally catching up. And listen to this. The closer they came to the truth, the calmer they felt. Not more afraid. Not more confused. Calmer. Because deep down, they were tired. Tired of denying it. Tired of questioning it. Tired of pretending they didn't already know. The truth had waited long enough. And last night, they finally stopped running from it. For the first time, they admitted what they had been afraid to admit. They admitted your presence mattered. They admitted your memory mattered. They admitted your connection mattered. And most importantly, they admitted the future they secretly wanted kept including you. Again. And again. And again. And once they admitted that truth, everything changed. Not because life suddenly became perfect. Not because every problem disappeared. Because honesty finally entered the room. And honesty brought peace. The kind of peace they had been searching for all along. If you enjoy spiritual and uplifting content, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after spending years questioning their feelings, your soulmate finally admitted a truth they had been avoiding for far too long. Not because the truth was difficult to understand. Because the truth was impossible to ignore. And listen to this. After the long night of reflection, something felt different. The confusion that had followed them for so long seemed weaker. The uncertainty that once controlled their thoughts seemed quieter. For the first time in a very long time, they weren't searching for answers. They were finally listening. Listening to the part of themselves they had ignored. Listening to the feelings they kept pushing away. Listening to the truth that had patiently waited for them to acknowledge it. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes the answers we seek have been inside us the entire time. We simply aren't ready to hear them. Your soulmate was finally ready. And listen to this. As the night continued, they found themselves revisiting old memories. Not because they wanted to. Because the memories kept appearing. One after another. Moments they thought were ordinary. Moments they barely paid attention to when they happened. Moments that somehow became unforgettable. And the strange thing was this. Every memory that mattered seemed connected to you. A conversation. A laugh. A message. A feeling. Something small. Yet somehow powerful. Because your heart needs this right now because meaningful connections are rarely built from dramatic moments. They're built from small moments repeated over time. Tiny moments. Quiet moments. Honest moments. Moments that slowly become impossible to forget. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that. And listen to this. For years they believed feelings were supposed to be obvious. Supposed to arrive dramatically. Supposed to announce themselves. But what they discovered was very different. The deepest feelings often grow quietly. Without permission. Without warning. Without explanation. They simply grow. Day after day. Memory after memory. Moment after moment. Until eventually they become impossible to deny. That is exactly what happened. And your heart needs this right now because genuine feelings don't disappear simply because we ignore them. Sometimes ignoring them only gives them more time to grow. Your soulmate learned that firsthand. And listen to this. One realization kept returning throughout the night. A realization that made everything else suddenly make sense. Whenever something important happened in their life, they wanted to tell you. Whenever they experienced something exciting, they thought about you. Whenever they felt confused, they thought about you. Whenever they imagined happiness, somehow you appeared there too. At first, they dismissed it. Then they questioned it. Then they accepted it. Because eventually the pattern became impossible to ignore. And your heart needs this right now because the people who matter most often become part of our everyday thoughts without us realizing it. Not intentionally. Naturally. Your soulmate had reached that realization. And listen to this. As the truth became clearer, another question appeared. A question they had never honestly answered before. What exactly am I afraid of? For years they thought they were afraid of rejection. Afraid of uncertainty. Afraid of change. Yet when they looked deeper, they discovered something surprising. Those weren't the real fears. The real fear was admitting how much you mattered. Because admitting that truth would change everything. It would force honesty. It would force vulnerability. It would force them to stop pretending. And suddenly they understood why they had delayed it for so long. Because your heart needs this right now, because vulnerability feels dangerous when something genuinely matters. The more important something becomes, the more courage it requires. Your soulmate finally found that courage. And listen to this. The truth itself wasn't complicated. In fact, it was incredibly simple. You had become one of the most important people in their emotional world. Not because of perfection. Not because of fantasy. Not because of unrealistic expectations. Because of consistency. Because of connection. Because of meaning. Because somehow your presence created feelings they could not recreate anywhere else. And that realization changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because some people affect us differently. Their presence feels different. Their absence feels different. Their memory feels different. Your soulmate finally admitted that you were one of those people. And listen to this. The closer they came to the truth, the more peaceful they felt. Not more anxious. Not more afraid. More peaceful. Because there is something freeing about honesty. Something healing. Something powerful. For years they had been carrying unanswered questions. Now they finally had answers. For years they had been carrying uncertainty. Now they finally had clarity. For years they had been carrying denial. Now they finally had acceptance. And acceptance changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often begins the moment we stop fighting reality. The battle ends. The resistance ends. The truth remains. Your soulmate had finally reached that point. And listen to this. As dawn approached, one final realization appeared. A realization that would ultimately change the direction of their future. They realized they no longer wanted to spend their life wondering. Wondering what could have happened. Wondering what might have been. Wondering whether they should have listened to their heart sooner. That future suddenly felt unbearable. Because regret felt heavier than uncertainty. And honesty felt lighter than fear. That realization became a turning point. A major turning point. And your heart needs this right now because many people spend years avoiding risk only to discover they created regret instead. Your soulmate didn't want that anymore. Not this time. And listen to this. For the first time in years, they looked directly at the truth. No excuses. No distractions. No avoidance. Just honesty. And the truth was simple. You mattered. More than they admitted. More than they expected. More than they understood at first. And once that truth was fully accepted, the future looked different. Brighter. Clearer. More authentic. Because now they knew what their heart had been trying to tell them all along. The person they kept thinking about. The person they kept remembering. The person who kept appearing in every meaningful vision of the future. Was you. And for the first time, they stopped running from that truth. If this message is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after finally admitting the truth about their feelings, your soulmate reached a realization so powerful that it changed everything. Not just their thoughts. Not just their emotions. Their entire future. And listen to this. For years, they believed there would always be more time. More time to think. More time to decide. More time to figure everything out. More time to understand what their heart was trying to say. Whenever uncertainty appeared, they postponed decisions. Whenever feelings became intense, they distracted themselves. Whenever honesty felt uncomfortable, they convinced themselves they would deal with it later. Later became days. Days became months. Months became years. And somehow, without realizing it, they had spent a very long time waiting. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for perfect timing. Waiting for fear to disappear. Waiting for a sign. But last night, something changed. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the biggest realization in life is understanding that waiting can become a habit. A comfortable habit. A safe habit. A habit that quietly steals opportunities while convincing us we're being careful. Your soulmate was beginning to see that clearly. And listen to this. As they reflected on everything, one question suddenly appeared in their mind. A simple question. Yet a powerful one. What exactly am I waiting for? At first, they thought they knew the answer. Maybe they were waiting for certainty. Maybe they were waiting for the perfect circumstances. Maybe they were waiting for guarantees. But the longer they thought about it, the less those answers made sense. Because certainty never comes first. Action comes first. Courage comes first. Honesty comes first. And only then does clarity grow. That realization stopped them completely. Because your heart needs this right now, because many people spend years waiting for confidence before making a choice. Yet confidence is often created by making the choice. Not before it. After it. Your soulmate finally understood that. And listen to this. For the first time, they imagined two different futures. The first future was familiar. Safe. Predictable. The future where they continued waiting. The future where they continued avoiding difficult truths. The future where they kept pretending everything was fine. At first glance, it looked comfortable. Yet the longer they imagined it, the heavier it felt. Because something was missing. Something important. Something real. Then they imagined a second future. A future built on honesty. A future built on courage. A future built on authenticity. A future where they finally stopped hiding from what they truly felt. And suddenly the difference became impossible to ignore. One future felt safe. The other felt alive. And your heart needs this right now because there is a huge difference between feeling safe and feeling alive. Many people spend their lives choosing safety. Very few choose authenticity. Your soulmate realized they wanted authenticity more. Perhaps for the first time. And listen to this. As the night grew quieter, they found themselves thinking about regret. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Regret. Because suddenly they understood something powerful. The greatest pain would not come from trying and failing. The greatest pain would come from never trying at all. Never being honest. Never taking the chance. Never finding out what could have happened. That realization hit harder than anything else. Because your heart needs this right now because unanswered questions can follow people for years. Sometimes for entire lifetimes. Your soulmate no longer wanted to carry those questions. Not anymore. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the clearer everything became. Every meaningful memory. Every important conversation. Every moment that stayed alive in their heart. Somehow, they all pointed toward the same truth. You mattered. Not temporarily. Not accidentally. Not casually. You mattered deeply. And once they accepted that, another realization followed. If someone matters that much, why keep pretending otherwise? If someone affects your life that much, why keep hiding from it? If someone remains in your heart after all this time, why keep running? Suddenly, there were no good answers. Only excuses. And your heart needs this right now because eventually excuses lose their power. Eventually honesty becomes stronger. Your soulmate had reached that point. And listen to this. The strange thing was that the realization didn't make them feel afraid. It made them feel relieved. Because for the first time, they stopped carrying the burden of uncertainty. For the first time, they stopped fighting themselves. For the first time, they stopped treating their feelings like a problem that needed solving. Instead, they accepted them. Completely. And acceptance brought peace. Real peace. The kind that only appears when someone finally tells themselves the truth. Because your heart needs this right now because inner peace often begins the moment we stop arguing with reality. The battle ends. The resistance ends. The pretending ends. What remains is clarity. Your soulmate was finally experiencing that clarity. And listen to this. As dawn slowly approached, one final realization appeared. A realization that changed everything. They realized that choosing you wasn't really about choosing another person. It was about choosing honesty. Choosing authenticity. Choosing courage. Choosing the version of themselves that no longer wanted to live in fear. And suddenly they understood why this moment felt so important. Because it wasn't only changing how they felt about you. It was changing how they felt about themselves. For the first time, they trusted their heart. For the first time, they trusted their truth. For the first time, they trusted what they already knew deep down. And that trust became the turning point. The moment everything changed. The moment waiting ended. The moment fear lost control. The moment they finally decided that tomorrow was no longer the answer. The answer was now. Because some opportunities deserve courage. Some feelings deserve honesty. And some people deserve to be chosen. In their heart, you became one of those people. Join our spiritual community by subscribing and keeping notifications on, so you never miss a message meant for your soul. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after years of hesitation, months of reflection, and one unforgettable night of honesty, your soulmate finally reached the moment that changed everything. The moment they stopped wondering. The moment they stopped waiting. The moment they stopped running. The moment they finally chose you. And listen to this. It didn't happen with fireworks. It didn't happen with a dramatic announcement. It didn't happen with some grand, cinematic moment. It happened quietly. The way the most important decisions often do. A quiet realization. A quiet acceptance. A quiet promise made within their own heart. Because sometimes the loudest transformations happen in complete silence. And your heart needs this right now because the biggest decisions in life rarely happen in front of an audience. They happen when nobody is watching. They happen when a person finally tells themselves the truth. Your soulmate had reached that moment. And listen to this. As the night grew later, they found themselves staring into the darkness, replaying everything that had brought them to this point. Every memory. Every lesson. Every moment of confusion. Every moment of clarity. The entire journey suddenly appeared before them like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. And for the first time, nothing felt random anymore. Everything made sense. The delays made sense. The hesitation made sense. The fear made sense. Even the waiting made sense. Because every step had led here. To this exact moment. And your heart needs this right now because sometimes life only makes sense when viewed backward. While we're living through uncertainty, everything feels confusing. But eventually the pieces connect. Eventually the story reveals itself. Your soulmate was finally seeing the full picture. And listen to this. For years they had convinced themselves they needed more information. More certainty. More signs. More proof. Yet sitting there in the silence, they suddenly understood something powerful. They already had enough. They always had. The truth had never been missing. Only courage had been missing. And that realization changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because most people don't lack answers. They lack permission. Permission to trust themselves. Permission to trust their heart. Permission to choose what genuinely matters. Your soulmate finally gave themselves that permission. And listen to this. The moment they did, a strange feeling appeared. Relief. Deep relief. The kind that arrives after carrying a heavy burden for far too long. The burden of uncertainty. The burden of denial. The burden of pretending not to know what they already knew. For years they had been fighting their own feelings. Questioning them. Analyzing them. Trying to explain them away. Yet no matter how hard they tried, the truth remained. And now they were finally tired of fighting it. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often arrives when resistance ends. The battle ends. The arguments end. The confusion ends. And what remains is truth. Your soulmate had finally reached that peace. And listen to this. As they reflected on the future, they realized something remarkable. Every version of happiness they imagined included the same thing. Honesty. Authenticity. Connection. Meaning. And somehow, whenever they imagined those things, you were there. Not because they forced the image. Not because they wanted to create a fantasy. Because their heart naturally placed you there. Again. And again. And again. Until the pattern became impossible to ignore. And your heart needs this right now, because repeated truth eventually becomes certainty. A single thought can be dismissed. 1,000 returning thoughts cannot. Your soulmate understood that now. And listen to this. For the first time, they stopped asking whether choosing you was the right decision. Instead, they asked a different question. A much more important question. If I already know what my heart wants, why am I still pretending not to know? The answer never came. Because there wasn't one. There were only fears. Only doubts. Only old habits. And suddenly none of those things felt powerful anymore. Not compared to the truth. Because your heart needs this right now, because fear becomes smaller when viewed beside something meaningful. What once seemed overwhelming begins to lose its power. Your soulmate was discovering that. And listen to this. Then came the moment. The exact moment. The moment everything changed. The moment they stopped negotiating with themselves. The moment they stopped delaying. The moment they stopped creating new excuses. The moment they finally said, "I'm done running." 3 simple words. Yet those words changed everything. Because hidden inside those words was another truth. A truth they had been avoiding for far too long. The truth that choosing you wasn't really about choosing another person. It was about choosing authenticity. Choosing courage. Choosing honesty. Choosing the future they genuinely wanted. And once they understood that, the decision became obvious. Because your heart needs this right now, because some choices feel impossible until we see what they're really about. Then suddenly everything becomes clear. Your soulmate finally saw clearly. And listen to this. The decision wasn't perfect. It wasn't free from uncertainty. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was real. And real mattered more than perfect. For too long they chased certainty. Now they wanted truth. For too long they chased approval. Now they wanted authenticity. For too long they chased comfort. Now they wanted meaning. And meaning always pointed toward the same realization. You. And your heart needs this right now because meaningful people leave fingerprints on the soul. Long after conversations end. Long after circumstances change. Long after time passes. The impact remains. Your soulmate felt that impact deeply. And listen to this. As dawn approached, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in years, they felt free. Not because every problem disappeared. Not because every question was answered. Because they finally stopped betraying themselves. They finally aligned their heart with their choices. And that alignment created freedom. Real freedom. The kind that cannot be purchased. The kind that cannot be faked. The kind that only comes from truth. And your heart needs this right now because freedom begins when honesty begins. The two are inseparable. Your soulmate had finally discovered that. And listen to this. When the first light of morning appeared, they realized something beautiful. The night had changed them. Not dramatically. Not magically. Honestly. They were no longer the person who entered that night carrying confusion. They had become someone new. Someone clearer. Someone braver. Someone more authentic. Someone finally willing to trust their own heart. And that transformation became the true victory. Because your heart needs this right now because choosing someone isn't always the biggest decision. Sometimes the biggest decision is choosing truth. Choosing courage. Choosing yourself. Your soulmate had done all three. And that is why the choice changed their life forever. And listen to this. Today, when they think back on that night, they don't remember fear. They don't remember doubt. They don't remember hesitation. They remember clarity. They remember peace. They remember the exact moment everything finally made sense. The exact moment they stopped fighting what they already knew. The exact moment they finally accepted the truth. The exact moment they chose you. And in that moment, something remarkable happened. The future stopped feeling frightening. The future started feeling possible. Because for the first time, it was built on honesty. And honesty became the foundation for everything that came next. Before you go, please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. May peace, light, and blessings always be with you.